My neighbor destroyed my legally recorded property line markers on camera. Not once, not by accident. He drove his riding mower straight over nearly $3,000 worth of certified survey stakes. Those were the same stakes that proved the land was mine. Then he planted his own flags in my yard. He sent his kids to rip out my markers. And when I confronted him, he screamed at me in front of my 7-year-old daughter, like I was the one stealing from him. But this time I had everything: the survey, the deed, the camera footage, the emails, the permits, and every single letter he thought I was too scared to answer. This is the story of how I stopped my neighbor from taking my property line by force, and how it ended with him writing me a check. Now picture this. You come home one afternoon and see your neighbor standing at the edge of your yard. He is staring at the wooden survey stakes a licensed land surveyor installed just 48 hours earlier. Official stakes, filed with the county, paid for with money we had saved for my daughter's summer camp. Then he starts the mower and drives straight over every one of them. I just stood there, frozen, because I had followed the law. He had followed his ego. Okay, let me back up and actually introduce myself because context matters here. I'm Jane. I'm a freelance interior designer. I work from home most days, which means I'm around a lot. I've got a husband, Marcus, who's an electrician, and we have a 7-year-old daughter named Lily. We're a pretty normal, quiet family. We like our weekends. We like our backyard. We really love our peace and quiet. About 4 years ago, Marcus and I bought our house in a small suburb outside of Indianapolis. It wasn't our forever home. We were honest about that from the beginning. But it was our home, and we were proud of it. We painted, we landscaped, we built a little vegetable garden on the side yard. Lily helped plant it every spring. She's the one who picks out the tomato varieties. She takes that job very seriously. It's a modest property, not huge, but enough. A decent-sized lot, a 2-car garage, and a backyard that gets beautiful afternoon light. We love it. When we bought the house, we went through the full mortgage process: inspections, a basic survey, title search, the whole thing. We received what's called a mortgage survey. It is a rough map of the property boundaries for the purposes of the loan. It's not particularly precise. It's designed to satisfy the bank, not to resolve neighbor disputes down the road. But at the time, we had no reason to think we'd ever need anything more detailed. We got along fine with most of our neighbors. The couple on the left had lived there for over 20 years. Sweet people, always waved. The family behind us barely came outside. Things were quiet, and then there was the house on our right. I'll call him Randy. I don't say what I'm about to say lightly, but Randy was a problem from the very first week we moved in. Not in a dramatic way, not in a call the police immediately way. More in that exhausting, low-grade, every single day kind of way, the kind that wears you down slowly. He had a giant pickup truck. He revved it at 7 in the morning on weekends for absolutely no reason. He had 3 dogs. They barked in what felt like scheduled rotations. His music on summer evenings was the kind of loud you felt in your chest wall, from 3 houses away. And the way he talked to people was just as bad, like the world owed him something, like everybody around him was failing to pay up. I told Marcus within the first month, that guy is going to be a problem someday. I had no idea how right I was. Let me set the physical scene because it really matters to understand what happened. Our property sits on a slightly irregular lot. The right side of the house has always been a little visually ambiguous. That is the side bordering Randy's property. There's no fence between the yards. The grass just kind of continues from one property into the other, and somewhere in the middle, a line exists on paper, a line most people couldn't eyeball accurately if they tried. According to our mortgage survey, the boundary ran along a specific path. And for the first 2 years we lived there, it was never an issue. We stayed on our side, Randy stayed on his, and we maintained the kind of polite mutual ignorance that passes for neighborhood harmony. Then 2 things happened. First, Randy got a new truck, bigger than the last one. And for some reason, he decided a small strip of gravel was a perfectly acceptable overflow parking spot. It was along the right side of our yard, clearly within our property line, according to the mortgage survey. I let it go the first time, and the second, because honestly, I didn't want to deal with Randy. The second thing was that we decided to install a privacy fence. This wasn't impulsive or retaliatory. Marcus and I had been talking about it for 2 years. Lily was getting older. We wanted a defined backyard for her, and the privacy would be a welcome bonus. We hired a reputable fencing company. We pulled the required permit from the city. And, this is important, we deliberately had the fence installed a few feet inside what we believed was our actual property line. Why? Because we didn't want to fight with Randy. We were giving him extra space he wasn't technically entitled to. It was a gesture of goodwill. My thinking was simple: give him some breathing room and maybe he'll relax. The fence went up in February. By March, Randy had started parking his truck in the gravel strip between our fence and his new imaginary property line. In his version of reality, that line had somehow expanded several feet into our yard. I didn't say anything at first. I told Marcus, let's just watch and see. By April, he was mowing past the fence line. We'd placed a few small plastic garden stakes near the corner of the yard. They marked where we wanted to plant tomatoes that season. They were clearly on our side of the fence. Randy pulled them out. Marcus went outside and asked him, calmly and politely, to please not touch our property. Randy said, "Your fence is wrong. This is my yard. Your stakes are in my yard. Don't put that garbage on my property again." Marcus came inside, jaw set tight. Then he said, "Jane, we have a problem." Over the following weeks, it became clear that Randy had decided something. A significant stretch of our yard actually belonged to him. No documentation, no legal basis, no measurement of any kind, just Randy's word. And Randy's word, as we were learning, came at high volume, usually with colorful language, usually in front of anyone who happened to be in earshot, including Lily. That was the moment I stopped trying to keep the peace. The first time Randy really crossed a line was a Tuesday evening in May. Not just the property line, a different kind of line. The kind that told me this was more than a grumpy neighbor situation. Marcus was still at work. I was inside at my desk, finishing up a client presentation. Lily was outside in the front yard. She was playing with sidewalk chalk about 30 feet from the corner where all of this kept happening. I heard shouting. I looked up from my laptop. Through the window, I saw Randy standing at the edge of our yard. He was pointing at the ground near Lily's feet. She had set down a couple of chalk markers near the property line. He was loudly telling her she was on his grass. He told her she needed to move her things. Lily was 7 years old. She had no idea what was happening. She just picked up her chalk and walked toward the front door. She looked confused and a little scared. I was outside in about 15 seconds. I said, "Randy, she was in our yard. Please don't speak to my daughter that way." He turned to me with that look, the one that told me he'd already decided how this conversation was going to go. Randy said, "Your yard? You don't even know where your yard is, sweetheart." I held my voice steady. I said, "I have a mortgage survey that says exactly where our property line is. My daughter was well within it." Randy said, "Your little paper survey is wrong. This strip right here, it's mine. Always has been mine. You put that fence up wrong, and I'm going to prove it." I didn't argue further. I said, "Okay, Randy." Then I went back inside. My hands were shaking. That night, I told Marcus everything. He was quiet for a long moment. That is how he gets when he's actually angry and choosing not to show it. Then he said, "We need to document everything, starting right now." He was right. That decision ended up being one of the most important things we did. From that point forward, we documented everything methodically. We bought 2 security cameras the next day, one for the front, it was angled toward the right side of the house, one for the back corner. That one covered the fence line. Nothing fancy, just solid, date-stamped coverage of our own property. Good thing we did. Over the next 6 weeks, things escalated well beyond a sidewalk chalk argument. Randy pulled our garden stakes out again. This time, we caught it on camera. He walked over casually while Marcus was at work. He yanked them out, then he tossed them into our garden bed. His teenage son did it twice more. Also on camera, clearly with Randy's knowledge. The timing was too deliberate to be coincidence. We also started getting notes, handwritten notes. They were slipped under our front door or left on the windshield of my car. Your fence is over the line. Move your stakes. You'll be hearing from me. No signature, but we both knew. We kept every single one in a Ziploc bag. That was Marcus's idea. He kept saying everything is evidence, and he was right. At some point in there, I started sleeping less well. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about it. I'd check the camera app on my phone before I even made coffee. The dispute had moved from the yard into my head, and I was done with that. We had one clear option that would end this definitively. We needed a formal boundary survey done by a licensed professional, not a mortgage survey, a real survey, the kind that gets filed with the county, the kind that becomes the legal record. We started making calls the next morning. I want to stop here for a second. When I tell this story, people often ask the same question: why didn't you just ignore him? And I understand why they ask. I've asked myself that. The honest answer is simple. Ignoring it made it worse. Every time we let something slide, Randy read it as validation, as proof that he was right. And every time we said nothing, he pushed a little further. There was the morning I came outside to water the garden. Our entire row of black-eyed Susans had been mowed completely flat. They were planted along the fence line, well within our property, and they were gone. We're not talking accidentally clipped, we're talking flattened to the ground. The whole row gone. I went to the footage. There was Randy the evening before on his riding mower. He was running it slow and deliberate along the side of our fence, just slightly over the line. He did it in a straight, methodical pass, and he didn't look like a man who had made a mistake. I stood in the kitchen and stared at that footage for a long time. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I want to be clear about why I did that. Not because I expected them to arrest Randy for mowing flowers, but because I needed a formal record, a paper trail, something that showed a pattern, not just a single incident. The officer who came out was courteous. He took notes. He filed a report. Then he told us it was a civil matter. He suggested something specific. I remember this clearly. He suggested that we consider getting a formal property survey done. The officer said, "These boundary disputes, once you get an official survey on record with the county, they usually resolve themselves one way or another. People stop arguing when there's a legal document in front of them. Usually, not always, as we were about to find out." Getting the survey scheduled took about 3 weeks from the first call. We went with a licensed land surveying company. They had strong reviews. They also had specific experience with residential boundary work in our county. The cost came to $2,800. That was not an easy number for us. That was Lily's summer camp fund, essentially. But Marcus and I talked it over. We agreed on one thing. The cost of not knowing would be higher in the long run. The cost of not having documentation would be higher too. We were past the point of hoping it would sort itself out. The surveyor arrived on a Thursday morning in early July. He and his assistant were there for close to 4 hours. They ran measurements. They cross-referenced the county's recorded plat maps. They checked historical deed descriptions. They verified corner markers. Professional, quiet, thorough. And Randy watched every single second of it from his front porch. Arms folded, sunglasses on, not saying a word, just watching. The results were clear, unambiguous, and documented on a certified survey. That survey was then filed with the county recorder's office. Our fence? Correctly installed. It was actually placed several feet inside our true property line, exactly as we'd planned. The gravel strip Randy had been parking on? Ours. The flower bed he'd mowed over? Ours. Every inch of the ground he'd been claiming for months? Legally ours, officially ours, permanently ours. One of the survey stakes landed almost exactly where our original garden stake had been, the one Randy had pulled out and thrown aside like it was litter. I looked at that for a while. Then I called Marcus at work. I said, we were right about all of it. Marcus said, send me the documentation. Randy had watched the entire survey happen. He had seen every stake go in the ground. He understood what they meant. He mowed over 2 of them within 48 hours. I watched it on the footage the next morning, before coffee. He drove his mower along the fence line. He ran over 2 stakes. He knocked them sideways. Then he got off the mower. He walked over to one of the remaining stakes, and he looked straight up at the camera. He knew exactly where it was. He pulled the stake out of the ground. Then he walked back to his porch. Marcus watched that clip with me that evening. He didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he said, we're getting a lawyer. Before we did anything else, we got organized. If you ever find yourself in a property dispute, here is the single most useful thing I can tell you. And honestly, this applies to any civil dispute with a neighbor. Before you call a lawyer, build your file. Know exactly what you have. Because when you sit down with an attorney, you're paying by the hour. You want to walk in with everything sorted and labeled, not scattered across your phone camera roll, not buried in a junk drawer. Here's what we had by the time we made that call. The professional land survey. Certified. Signed. Filed with the county recorder. This was our foundation. It wasn't an opinion. It wasn't an estimate. It was a legal record. Permanent. Recorded. And unlike anything Randy could simply disagree with and make untrue. Camera footage. We had Randy mowing over the survey stakes on video. We had his son pulling out our garden markers. Twice. We had Randy himself pulling a certified corner stake out of the ground, and he was looking directly at our camera while he did it. That third clip was extraordinary evidence. To be blunt about it, the police report from the flower incident, not dramatic, but it established a documented pattern over time. The notes, every single anonymous handwritten slip he'd put under our door or on my car, still in the Ziploc bag, handled as little as possible. Photographs, hundreds of them, all date and time stamped. The mowed flowers, tire tracks in our gravel, missing stakes, and the flag. Oh, the flag. I almost forgot to mention the flag. A few days after the survey stakes were mowed over, Randy planted a small American flag in the ground, about 6 feet inside our fence line, right in the middle of the disputed strip. Like he was planting a claim. I removed it. It was on my property. I had a certified survey to prove it. He put another one up 2 days later. I removed that one too. He screamed at me from his back porch. I went inside. I sat down at my desk, and I typed up a certified letter. Not aggressive, not emotional, just 1 page. Here is the survey. Here are the recorded property lines. Here is what is legally ours. And here is a formal request that you stop interfering with our property and our markers. I sent it via certified mail with return receipt requested. He didn't respond. But here's what he did instead. He called city code enforcement. He filed a complaint claiming our fence had been installed outside our property line. He claimed it was encroaching on his land. He wanted us fined and cited. The city sent an inspector. The inspector reviewed our building permit. He compared it against the survey. He measured the fence placement, and he found that we were not only compliant, we were set back from the line. We were nowhere near encroaching on Randy's property. The complaint was dismissed, and I was told something by our letter carrier. Apparently, she witnessed the tail end of the conversation. She said the inspector had informed Randy directly. Our survey was consistent with county records. His claims were unsupported by any documentation. I wasn't there for that, but I thought about it a lot. We now had everything we needed. Survey, footage, police report, documented notes, photos, a dismissed code complaint that confirmed our position, and a certified letter. That letter established that Randy had received formal written notice of the boundary, and that he had chosen to ignore it. I called Miss Ellison's office first thing Monday morning. I want to be real with you. Taking legal action against a neighbor is not fun. It's not fast, it's not cheap even in small claims, and it is emotionally draining in a specific, grinding way. It's hard to explain until you've done it, The way it follows you around, the way you rehearse conversations in your head at midnight, the way you second guess yourself, even when you know you're right. But it is effective, and in our case, it worked. We found our real estate attorney through a referral from our fencing contractor. When I called him to explain the situation, he didn't sound surprised. He said he'd seen versions of this before, and he had someone he trusted. Miss Ellison had been practicing property law for over 15 years. She was direct. She did not waste time, and she asked exactly the right questions. Our first consultation was about 90 minutes. We brought a printed binder, survey in section 1, photos in section 2, camera footage on a USB drive in a labeled envelope, the police report, the city inspection dismissal, the certified letter and its return receipt, the anonymous notes in their Ziploc bag. Ms. Ellison went through it methodically. She watched about 4 minutes of the camera footage. Then she looked up. She said, "This is a good file. What outcome are you looking for?" Marcus and I had talked about this beforehand. We were not trying to bankrupt Randy. We were not trying to make his life miserable. We were not doing this out of spite. We wanted 3 things. First, the encroachments had to stop permanently. Second, we wanted reimbursement for the survey cost. We had only incurred that cost because of his dispute. Third, we wanted compensation for the damaged property. Miss Ellison said that was reasonable and achievable. She drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It went out via certified mail about 10 days later. It was precise legal language, the kind that makes things real in a way a homeowner's letter simply cannot. It stated that the property line had been established by a licensed surveyor. It stated that the survey had been recorded with the county. It stated that Randy had received written notice of this boundary. It stated that he had repeatedly and knowingly trespassed on our property, that he had damaged our property, and that he had harassed us. It also stated what would happen if the behavior did not cease. We would pursue civil remedies, including injunctive relief and a small claims action for damages. The damages we were seeking totaled $3,400. That broke down as follows: $2,800 for the survey. We would never have needed to pay for it if not for Randy's refusal to accept any documented reality. $300 for the destroyed stakes and garden markers. $150 for the black-eyed Susans. We had the nursery receipt, and $150 in miscellaneous documentation costs. Randy received the letter. The certified mail return receipt came back signed. He didn't respond in writing, but something did change. For about 3 weeks, things went quiet. No mowing over the line, no flags, no notes, no revving the truck at 7 in the morning with unusual aggression, just quiet. I didn't trust it, but I'll admit, I slept a little better. Then, one morning in August, I came outside. 2 of the reinstalled survey stakes were knocked flat on the ground again. The surveying company had come back out to replace the originals. That had cost $200. It's possible a mower did it accidentally. Given everything, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I texted Miss Ellison, "File the small claims case." She did. Randy was served. A court date was set about 6 weeks out, and then, 10 days before the hearing, Randy knocked on our front door. Marcus answered. I stood just behind him. Randy looked different than I expected. Smaller, somehow. Less loud. He didn't come in. He stood on the porch and looked at the doormat. Randy said, "Look, I don't want to go to court over this." Marcus was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't uncertain. It's deliberate. Marcus said, "Okay, what are you proposing?" Randy said, "I'll cover the survey cost. The $2,800. I'm not admitting to anything. I just want this done." We stepped back inside to talk. Ms. Ellison had prepared us for exactly this. She'd told us something important. If he offers to settle and the number is close, take it seriously. Courts are unpredictable. A guaranteed outcome beats a better possible outcome. We made a counter. He pays the full $3,400. He signs a written acknowledgement of the property line as established by the survey, and he agrees in writing not to interfere with any markers, structures, or property within that boundary going forward. He asked for 2 days. 2 days later, he agreed. The settlement agreement was signed on a Thursday. Miss Ellison handled all the paperwork. Randy wrote us a check for $3,400. I'm not going to pretend that depositing that check felt neutral. It felt like a lot of things. Mostly, it felt like relief. The kind of relief that comes after months of low-grade, constant tension finally stops, actually stops. I hadn't realized how heavy I'd been carrying it until I put it down. But here's what the settlement actually meant beyond the money. Randy signed a document acknowledging the property line, in writing, with his full legal name and signature, witnessed and notarized, which means something very specific. If he ever touches a survey stake again, we don't start over. If he parks in our gravel strip, we don't start over. If he mows over our flowers, we don't start over. If he plants another flag in our yard, we don't start over. We don't go back to small claims. We have a signed agreement already in place. And the next step is contempt proceedings. The consequences are categorically different. The practical changes were immediate. The flags came down. He removed the last one himself. The truck stopped appearing in our gravel strip. The notes stopped. The screaming stopped. The mower stopped crossing the line. Randy still lives next door. I want to be honest. This didn't transform him into a good neighbor. His truck still makes more noise than it needs to. His dogs still bark. He still doesn't wave. But he does not cross our property line. Not by an inch. He mows right up to the surveyed boundary and stops. Every single time. Like there's a wall there he can see and I can't. A few weeks after the settlement was signed, I was in the backyard with Lily. She was running around being 7. She ran close to the fence line, close to where all of this had started. Old habit kicked in. I held my breath. Randy was in his yard. He glanced over. He turned around and went back to what he was doing. That moment mattered more to me than the check. There was also something I didn't anticipate. 2 neighbors reached out to us separately after word got around. People we'd barely spoken to before. Apparently, Randy had been running similar low-level territory games with at least 2 other households on the block. One of them told me she'd been putting up with it for 3 years. She didn't know she had options. She didn't think it was serious enough to do anything about. I told her everything we did. Document, survey, lawyer, file. She got her survey done a few months later. I don't know how that resolved, but I know the pattern started to fracture. Oh, and one more thing. The total Randy paid us was $3,400. That was more than what the survey cost us in the first place. He could have accepted the surveyor's results on a Thursday afternoon in July. The whole thing would have been over in a day. Instead, he paid us more than we spent. He signed a legal document, permanently establishing the property line in writing. The exact line he'd spent months insisting was wrong, and he gave us a signed agreement that protects us going forward. The black-eyed Susans came back the following spring. I replanted them along the same fence line, in the same spot. Randy has not touched them, so here's what I actually took away from all of this. Not just the neighbor stuff, the whole experience. The experience of standing up for something that was legally, factually, documentably mine. First, document everything, always. The moment we installed those cameras, the entire trajectory changed. The moment we started keeping organized records, the entire situation changed. Not because it scared Randy, it clearly didn't, but because it gave us a foundation. Every decision we made after that was grounded in evidence, not emotion, not memory. Evidence, and in any kind of dispute, evidence wins. With a neighbor, with a landlord, with a contractor, anyone, evidence wins over feelings every single time. Second, know what you actually own. I thought I knew our property line. I had a mortgage survey, but a mortgage survey is a rough approximation done for the bank. It is not the same thing as a boundary survey, and it does not have the same legal weight. If there is ever any genuine question about where your line is, get a proper survey done. Any genuine question at all, get it done. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it is inconvenient, but it is a permanent legal record filed with your county, and in a dispute, it is essentially unchallengeable. Third, get legal advice before you think you need it. I waited too long. We spent months trying to handle this ourselves. Calling a lawyer over a neighbor argument felt dramatic. It felt like escalating. But the moment Miss Ellison got involved, things moved. Slowly, yes, but in a direction that actually got us somewhere. One consultation would have saved us months of stress. Fourth, the paper trail is not just for court. It changes how you move through the situation in real time. When you have documentation, you are not reacting to whatever Randy did yesterday. You are responding from a position of organized fact. That shift matters enormously, especially for your own peace of mind. And fifth, this one is personal. Maybe it'll resonate with some of you. I want Lily to grow up watching what it actually looks like to stand your ground, not loudly, not aggressively, not by screaming across a yard, not by sending anonymous notes, not by mowing over someone else's property, but steadily, legally, methodically, with evidence in hand, and with a willingness to follow through. That, I think, is the part of this I'm most proud of. We still live in that house. We still love it. Lily still picks out the tomato varieties every spring. The black-eyed Susans are back. The backyard is quiet in the afternoons, and our neighbor stays on his side of the line. Now I want to hear from you, because I've told this story to a lot of people, and everyone has a different reaction. Some people say they would have lawyered up in month one. Some say they would have let it go entirely to keep the peace. Some say they would have handled it completely differently. So tell me, if this happened to you, what would you actually do? Would you have spent the money on the survey? Would you have gone to court? Or would you have drawn the line somewhere else entirely? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one.